Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bartelle's Money Talk. I'm Johnny.
And I am Theresa. And let me tell you, you want to stay for this entire show. We have Mr. Peter Culver with us, and he is a wealth coach. So if you don't have wealth now, Bartelle's Money Talk is going to help you obtain some wealth. So stay tuned and then listen to all of the nuggets that he's going to share with you. So, Mr. Peter, can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. So it's Peter Culver. I am today a co-founder of a wealth coaching firm called Freedom Family Office. And we provide a full range of coaching services, financial planning, tax reduction, investments, estate planning, insurance. And because the majority of our clients are entrepreneurs, that's our market niche as business owners. We do a lot of work in what's known as exit planning, which is if someday you want to sell a business that you've built up. Most people who've built them up don't know how to sell them. So we try and coach them on how to sell them.
Oh, that is great. And before we got on, you talked a little bit about financial literacy.
Correct.
Can you just speak on that a little bit? Because what you shared with us, I would love for you to share it with our listeners.
Oh, yeah. So I think I made the comment that, and I think of my own education, which started more decades ago than we want to talk about tonight, but I have a daughter who's 15. There's no financial education in elementary school, in high school, unless, and I mean by financial education, somewhat more practical financial education, right? I mean, I can take a course on investments or economics or all that stuff, but that's not necessarily going to teach you how to balance a budget or set money aside for your kids' education, all that nuts and bolts stuff. And so, I guess, that's a void we try and fill mostly with adults. But I will tell you that part of the reason we call our company Freedom Family Office is a lot of our clients are really families, right? So husband, wife, whatever partner arrangement it is, maybe children, whatever. And so they're on the point of financial education, there are amazing statistics that most entrepreneurs who create great wealth, it dissipates in about a generation or two after they've created the great wealth. And the reason is they haven't educated, trained, coached their children or their partner on what to do with that wealth when they're not around. And I'm sort of obsessed with this subject, but there's a lot of literature that you can begin with children at a relatively young age to try and share with them concepts about, what things cost and should you save. I'm having a lot of success right now. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. If you're a kid under 16, basically a bank will not let you open a bank account. They won't give you a debit card, all that kind of stuff. So there are a couple companies out there. One is called Greenlight. So my daughter has this little green card, and basically it's a debit card. I put all the money in, and basically the way mine works is she gets an allowance every Sunday, and that goes in, and she can decide, she can spend $100 in one day on junk food if she wants to. But what has been interesting is maybe through a little bit of my guidance is, so just as an example, I wouldn't have spent my money on this, but there was a pocketbook she couldn't live without, right? She got to have this, I don't know, Louis Vuitton or some crazy thing like that. So she saved. So I kind of said to her, well, you know what your allowance is, and that's not enough to buy the pocketbook each week. So you got to decide to take some of it and set it aside. And the green light has, these may not be quite the right words, a spending account and a savings account.
Okay.
So she saved over about whatever time period it was, $1,000.
Wow.
By not spending it on current things. Now, again, I wouldn't have spent it on what she wanted to spend it on. But she's learning,
The principle.
not just constant consumption. The other cool thing about green light is it has a little, it has like a charitable component. So if you want to give whatever it is, $10 to the Humane Society or Habitat for Humanity or your church or whatever. So I think you can't start too young, beginning to now. Our work is harder than that because we start with older people who haven't had any of that education. So
true.
The good news is I often will say, because I worked in New York City on Wall Street, there's an army of people out there that want you to believe that saving and investing is so complicated that you can't possibly figure it out by yourself. And so you have to pay people lots of money to do it for you. And the reality is that the basic concepts are basic, right? If I spend less money than I earn, I will have more money to do stuff with. And if I invest wisely, it will grow. And then if I start to think about something that we spend a lot of time in our company focusing on is not paying too much in tax. So, yeah.
And that's a good thing for business owners. They don't want to get all their income eaten up by taxes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have clients. I was on a call either yesterday, today. Yeah, actually, this guy lives in Hawaii, of all places. And you would think, well, that's paradise. And I guess it is in one sense. But the combined income tax rate, when you add it all up, the Fed, the state, the Medicare, it's 47%.
That's almost 50 if you ask me. That's ridiculous.
47%. Whoa.
Now, the good news is, which is where our coaching comes in, there are things you can do to impact that. And so that's an area of tax reduction. I often will say there are two ways to get wealthy in America. One is invest in something and make it get bigger. That could be a stock portfolio or real estate or a business. But just as importantly, pay less in tax. And if you think if you live in Hawaii and the tax rate is 47%, let's just say for the sake of argument, it's 50, right? If I save 50% on my taxes, they're in a year. There are not a lot of investments that grow by 50% in a year. So I'm actually making more money by not paying taxes than I might. That's not to say you shouldn't do the other part too.
Right.
So that's an area that we're very active with our clients in helping them pay less in tax.
It's a good thing to know.
So Peter, and all this information is great, but let's back up a little bit. What is a wealth coach? So all this can know what a wealth coach is.
Yeah, so and part of this will be what it is generically. And part of it will be kind of the philosophy of our company, which I think will resonate with you. So what we find is the phone rings and someone has a specific issue they're worried about, right? In our world, the phone rings the most because they either want to pay less in taxes, they want to have more wealth, or something that is somewhat specific to entrepreneurs is they know someday or to a retiree, they've got to figure out a way to generate what we call passive income when they're not working anymore, right? How do I construct that system? So, okay, we work on those things, but we get into a conversation with them at the beginning. And what we find out is they want to solve problems like paying less in taxes or having more income or increasing their wealth. But what they're really looking for are kind of some bigger things. One is what we call financial freedom, right? So I want enough money to do all the things that I want to do, but also enough so that I don't have to worry about money, because money worries are among the worst, right? For what do they say? I think it's one of the most common reasons people get divorced is differences of opinion about money. It can be an upsetting thing, right? So that's, one thing that we focus a lot of attention on. The second area I would say is when we get into a conversation with them, they often will express what we call a higher purpose. Now, by that, I don't necessarily mean religion or anything like that, but they wish they had more time and more money to devote their energy to things other than just making money. Now, that could be more time with their family, giving back to a community. Maybe they're involved in a religious community, those kinds of things. And so we have a concept that we use in our business, which is we want to help our clients become what we call rich beyond money. So they have that financial freedom, the baseline, but they're using that to get to a place that's even higher than just what's in the bank book, what's in the stock portfolio. They're building, you know, a life that is fulfilling. And so in our process, when we work with a new client, the very first thing we do is we have them do a couple of exercises, all of which are around what we call ideal life. So the simple version of that is close your eyes and think about it's 5 years from now, or it's 10 years from now. Paint me a picture, you know, Mr. or Mrs. Client, of what your ideal life would look like. So we've probably done 1,000 of those interviews and conversations. When people tell us about their ideal life, they don't talk about money. They talk about where they want to be, who they want to be with, who they don't want to be with sometimes, you know, what they want to be doing. So kind of the way we look at our role is we start with whatever they have to start with, their assets, their talents, you know, those kinds of things. We have this vision of their vision of where they want to get to, right? And so we look at the coaching part is kind of going shoulder to shoulder with them and showing them how, with some of our expertise and their raw material, we can get them from where they are now to where they really want to be. And so, you know, I think the coaching, whatever the right word is, metaphor is right? I'm tired of running the 100 in 10.5. I want to run the 100 in 9.8 or something like that, whatever, you know, it is. So that's kind of the role we play. And then, as I mentioned at the start, there are all kinds of components that can help them there. There's financial planning. How do I just map out my income and expense and savings and things like that? Taxes is big, as we've talked about. How can I not pay so much tax so that money stays in the bank account to do whatever I want to? We are involved in investing. Some of our clients, if they're wealthy enough, have issues around estate tax or life insurance, things like that. So we have a process where we look into each one of those areas, see what's going on there now, and essentially identify for them, we wouldn't quite say it this way, but what are you doing that you should stop doing? What are you not doing that you should start doing? And what are you doing that you need to do better to map out for them? We call that the freedom journey. That's our kind of little name we use for what we do. And so we go on a journey with our clients and we're their coach through the journey.
Well, that's good. Well, and then there's one more thing I want to pick your brain about. We were in our prior discussion, which I don't know if I ever forget what you said, but prior to COVID, you were commuting to New York City and you would come home on the weekends. And we're not happy that COVID came, but COVID changed your life to where you realize.
Yeah, so it made me, it turns out in hindsight that working in New York 4 or 5 days a week and coming home to Connecticut on the weekends was not my ideal life. So
what would you recommend to, because our audience is basically millennials. And if we say we have a 32-year-old, 35-year-old that may be working a distance from home and coming home on the weekends, what kind of advice could you give them? Like if you look back over your life, what would you have done differently?
So, I mean, I would say 2 things. One, and maybe, you know, experience is the greatest teacher of all, right? And maybe when you're young and you don't have a lot, you feel like you should devote your maximum energy to having more, which usually means more money, more savings, more investments, more properties and stuff like that. And it's easy to forget that, you know, if you were to make a balance sheet of your whole family, what are the most valuable assets on the family balance sheet? The people, right? Not the money, not the stocks and bonds, right? So, and New York and probably other big cities will just suck you into a world where it's money, 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 wealth, wealth, wealth. And so when I made that transition, it was, I don't know, just opened my, I have a beautiful home. It's in the country. We have land. I get to see my wife and one remaining daughter at home all the time. Now, the thing that makes it work, it's funny, is in a way, the schlepping back and forth to New York and the schlepping around New York City is a lot of time. Now, you can talk to your wife on the phone, maybe if you're walking around somewhere, or, a colleague, but you can't do a client presentation, walking up and down the streets in New York or on the train or something like that. So I think the new virtual world makes work so much more efficient. For me, that's given me more time to do other things that I want to do, which are really non-work related.
See,
I like that term.
I like that, non-work related.
Yeah.
How many people want to be non-work related and do other things they want to do? Wow.
Well, yeah, and it's so interesting because we do these, what we call, it's actually called, the questionnaire that we give people is called True North. And I didn't make up that phrase, but the idea is, if your heart had a compass, what direction is it pointing in? And the answer is, it's not pointing to your bank account. It's not pointing to your stock portfolio. It's pointing to that other, but you got to have all the other stuff organized and running on all cylinders, or you won't get to that other spot that you want to be in.
That's correct.
So I think it's easy when you're my age to tell millennials,
Well, good. I hope they're listening.
Yeah, me too.
So Peter, I know you said, you work with entrepreneurs, right? And so one of the things that, entrepreneurs usually have is cash flow. So how do you go about creating the cash flow with their profit, their business profit? How do you do that?
So in a couple of ways, I would say, assuming we have to start with the assumption that there is some positive cash flow that they don't need to spend, right? So what we're usually engaged with them is, you've got your business ecosystem, for lack of a better word, right? You got that all organized, and you need to build side by side with that some other stuff that will produce income later in life. Now, that can have a couple of components. Some relatively obvious stuff, like you should have an IRA account. If you work at a company, your own or somebody else's, you should have a 401k plan, that kind of thing. We go a little bit further than that. And if people can afford it, own real estate. Real estate is a wonderful income producing asset. And it's a timeless formula. You have to do it right. But if you have enough money for a down payment, this is what my wife does, buy a 3-story house that has 3 apartments in it, get a mortgage for an amount of money that the rents will pay for the mortgage. In the beginning, you don't necessarily make a lot of money, but basically your tenants are paying your mortgage. And so down the road, and so many of our clients, once they have their business on a solid foundation, real estate is often and that can take a number of forms. Sometimes people who have a business will buy a building for their business. They'll own the building. They'll rent the building to the business, more income. And someday, even if they sell the business to Mr. X, they keep renting the building to Mr. X. I just had a client who did that. He sold a business and the buyer didn't want to buy the building, but they did want to keep renting it. So he keeps getting the rent. And he's just sold his business, and he's slowly over time, nothing crazy elaborate, but, little condo here, little condo there. And they kind of real estate and has some great tax benefits too. So that's a good direction for people to go in, I think.
Okay. And then piggybacking off of that, based on your experience, what mistakes have you seen business owners make when it comes to investing?
So So I think it's a time kind of thing, right? So there's an old phrase, concentrate to create, diversify to preserve. So most people who start businesses, if their business turns out to be really successful, they're maniacal in the beginning, right? So like Elon Musk was maniacal about, I can make an EV car that's cool, right? It doesn't have to look like a tank or a Jeep or anything like that, right? So he was very, very focused on that. But you can end up as a result of that with a concentration of wealth in just one thing, right? You could just buy Apple stock. Now that's been a good one for a long time, but we try and coach, whether it's entrepreneurs or other people, begin to have, you know, a diversified portfolio, have a job or a business, have a 401k and some IRAs, maybe have a little investment property, maybe just buy a second home, which is a form of real estate investment. So I think that's, you know, diversification, age-old concept, but applicable not just to a stock and bond portfolio, but sort of applicable to your bigger portfolio, right? Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Okay.
So since we're talking on these lines of how to produce extra income if you have a business, can you discuss also what is like predictable income? Can you
Yeah, so
discuss?
I have a client who has a phrase for that, which she calls it checks in the mail, right?
Oh, we like checks in the mail. Well, let's talk about checks.
Or my money is working for me while I'm sleeping.
Oh, we love
We
that
love that
too.
too. We love all of
So
both of
whether that could be your portfolio, but in her case, she was a lawyer. She worked for a large pharmaceutical company, and she retired. And she's been building, with some guidance from us, for about the last 10 years, a portfolio of real estate. Now she likes what we call multifamily housing, apartment complexes, right? And so in that arena, you don't necessarily own apartment 11, you own a portion of the whole development. But so, and the ones that she likes tend to, it's a common formula, pay out about 8% a year. So if you think about what I've been talking about, you know, that's about the average of the stock market over a long time period. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse, but that's a cash return, right? The stock market is some cash, but mostly appreciation. Bond market now is probably 4 or 5%. And I mean, I hope it's true. It's coming down. I hope it keeps coming down. That'll be good for the economy. But if in that environment, I can own some investment that are on a regular basis generating, say, 8%, that's usually predictable. It doesn't, it's what we call passive, meaning if the pipe bursts in the middle of the night, they're not calling my client Judy, right? They're calling the property management company, right?
Right.
And she has interest in these complexes all over the country. And then real estate is also keying into something else we've been talking about, which is taxes, is that, and bear with me. So real estate, investment real estate, usually qualifies for depreciation, which is a deduction against the income. So you can be getting the 8% income, but maybe 50, 60% of it, the income is offset by the depreciation. So you get the 8%, but maybe you pay tax on 4%.
We like that.
So that's
taxes.
So many, many people in America from all walks of life, all beginnings, have made a lot of money in
real estate.
So that's a good one.
Okay. And so before we let you go, you have 2 books. Do you want to tell the audience about your 2 books?
Well, yeah. So as I mentioned a minute ago, because we work with business owners, and many business owners at some point often decide to sell their businesses.
Mm-hmm.
One area of coaching that we're involved in is what's known as exit planning. So, and without getting into all the X's and O's of it, selling a business is a complicated process, which I think business owners tend to think, well, I started my business in my grandmother's garage, and now it's thriving and successful. So who would be a better person to sell it than me? Big mistake, because there's a lot of stuff that goes into selling a business effectively. So it kind of circles back to sort of where we started is we want to coach them on what they need to know to sell their business effectively and kind of, run around the track beside them to do that. So that, I think that book title is something like Exit Rich Beyond Money. And the point of that is the sole purpose of selling your business shouldn't be just, oh, I'm going to get a big check, right? It should be, what am I going to use that for? What am I going to do after I sell my business when I don't go to the office every day, and when I walk in the door, I don't have a hat on that says Mr. CEO and everybody goes like this. So, and then we have another, if it's the one you're referring to, somewhat more broadly, just about this concept of rich beyond money, of, that don't look at money as just a means in itself. It's a means to an end. And I think for most people, if they think about it, the end isn't just having more dollars or more investments like that. It's having a quality life.
That's right.
That's absolutely correct.
Don't you think?
That.
Rich beyond money.
Yeah,
I like that.
That's important. Rich beyond money. Some things money can't buy.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah. And which is true. And I think, again, I'm, somewhat older, but you have to work just as hard to earn the wealth that isn't monetary. It's not a layup, right? You got to spend time with your family. You got to coach your kids. You got to be involved in your community and stuff like that. Now, I'm lucky because I like all that stuff, but I love working with clients.
Yes.
So I love all the little problems and, intellectual things that comes with being an advisor. So, and if you do a good job, there's the result right in front of you, right? So it's satisfying work. So I'm lucky. I keep working because I'm fortunate enough that I love what I do. So I don't know when I'll ever stop. My wife, but anyway.
Well, you keep working and you don't have to commute to New York anymore.
Yeah.
I won't.
Yes.
Well, Peter, we want to thank you for spending your time here with us on Bartelle's Money Talk. We really appreciate all the good information and advice that you provided. So we hope this content will hopefully help somebody, some of our listeners out there. And thank you for sharing. And if you like our content, please like, share, and subscribe to Bartelle's Money Talk. And we look forward to talking to you again, Peter. Thank you very much.
That'd be fun. I appreciate your time. Y'all have a good evening.
You too.